Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Aviation Nerd Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Scott Kartvedt, call sign Intake, and he was a fighter pilot in the Navy flying F-18s, and he even went on to fly in the esteemed United States Navy's Flight Demonstration Squadron, the Blue Angels. After he left the Blue Angels, he went on to various different assignments and even commanded the Navy's first F35 Squadron. After his time flying for the Navy, he went on to fly for United Airlines, and even joined the Patriots Jet Demonstration Team. He even wrote a book called Throttle, which details all his stories from flying with the Blue Angels to filming Gun Maverick and everything in between. I would highly recommend you checking it out. In this interview, we talk about his incredible career, so I'm so excited to welcome to the podcast, Scott Intake Kartvedt. I learned about you that you grew up in Southern California. If my calculations are correct, it was in the 1970s, right? What was your first memory of aviation?
My first memory of aviation was probably in the deserts of El Centro where the Blue Angels practice. And I can remember seeing the Blue Jets, but it wasn't until high school when the movie came out where I realized that that was definitely the adrenaline rush that I was looking for.
So, as you mentioned, you saw the original Top Gun movie, but what was it? In what way did it really inspire you? Was there like a particular moment of the
No,
movie?
I think, at the beginning of the movie where the jets are on the catapult and the flight deck and the music's playing, the dun 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 dun, and the steam's coming off the catapult, and it just kind of reached out and grabbed me, and I thought that is something that I definitely want to do.
So nice. So you ended up going to Pepperdine University, right? And at that point,
Yeah.
you didn't go towards a military career, but why Pepperdine?
Oh, that's a great question. The honest truth is, I had a good friend named Brad, and his older sister went there, and I found her to be very attractive. And I thought, well, if Kristen's going there, then there might be some other attractive girls there, and so that's why I applied.
So, and what was your goal? What kind of career were you shooting for?
Well, honestly, I was looking to get into real estate at the beginning and kind of be a real estate developer. My interest was in business, and I ended up having to take some accounting classes. And a lot of people don't like accounting, but I found it to be really straightforward, and it just made sense to me. So I switched my major to become an accounting major.
Yeah, you did end up becoming an accountant, from what I heard. And when
Yeah.
did you really make that career change? Because obviously you ended up as a fighter pilot. When did that really happen?
So I actually graduated and went to work for a company called KPMG Pete Marwick in Century City, which was at the time one of the big eight accounting firms, and is still what I think there's four left, but one of the big four firms. And my best friend from high school, who I had seen Top Gun with, had gotten his undergraduate pilot training slot in the Air Force. And he called and said, "Hey, Scott, I'm doing it." And I said, "Okay, Bob, I'll do it too." And so I literally hung up the phone with him and called the Navy recruiting district in Los Angeles and told them that I was interested in becoming a Navy pilot. And that's kind of what started the process. But the process, Nathan, took about a year. And so I continued to work as an accountant and was putting in some pretty long hours. And I sat for the CPA exam, and the Navy came back with their results of the pilot board, and I was fortunate enough to get selected. So it was about a year and a half from the time that I graduated until I was actually at aviation officer candidate school.
Yeah. And so you obviously went to the Navy. Why did you pick the Navy? Because I mean, I know when most people think of fighter jets, they think of the Air Force, but was it because you saw Top Gun?
Oh, Nathan, I disagree. I think most of the people think of fighter jets, they think of the Navy.
I mean,
They think Air Force because of the title, but I never even thought of applying to the Air Force. Navy, my dad was a submariner in the Navy. My grandfather was a mechanic on helicopters in the Navy. And I never even considered the Air Force. I just knew that I wanted to be a Navy fighter pilot, and that was the direction that I took.
All right. So then you graduated from OCS, right? You then selected to fly F-18s, right? There were a lot of other jets there at the time. There was F-14s, I believe there were S-3s, A-6s, there's some F-14s, right? Why did you pick the F-18?
So interestingly, I had originally wanted to fly fighters. When you go through the pipeline, you have to go through primary flight training, and then you pick your career path, which is either helicopters, maritime, which are either P3s at the time or what is P8s now, or jets. And I was fortunate to select jets, and then flew the T2 and the A4, which were the intermediate and advanced jets at the time. And at the end, I actually wanted to fly A6s because I knew that all of the A6s or the A6 pilots were going to become F-18 pilots. And I thought it'd be really great to fly the A6 as a big bomb carrier. And I got winged with my naval aviation wings about 2 weeks after the last A6s were given out. And so I knew that I wanted to fly the F-18. At the time, the F-14 was just an intercept air-to-air platform. And so I was fortunate to select the F-18.
So you then entered the fleet and you ended up getting carrier qualified, which is a huge accomplishment. And you were flying the F-18. But in that time, you also earned the call sign intake, which if you could just briefly explain how you got that call sign. And also, I know some other pilots have multiple call signs in their career. Were you one of those pilots or did you only
Yeah,
have?
it's interesting, Nathan. There were a series of attempts to change the call sign because usually you do something silly that people want to give you a hard time about, and that can generate a call sign. But intake came from a good friend of mine named JJ, and he was giving me a hard time for my nose. So if I turn to the profile, I take in more than my fair share of air, and that's
Yeah.
where intake comes from.
So then, skipping ahead a little bit, you decided to, after you were flying for a while, a few years, you decided to put in an application for the Blue Angels, which I am a huge fan of the Blue Angels myself. But what was the reason behind that decision?
Well, I don't, I honestly, I don't know where that initial desire came from, other than I have always pursued goals that I have been interested in. And so once I had made the decision that I wanted to at least apply to the team and try to be on the team, I went all in and went through the process. The first year in 1998, I was selected to be a finalist, but I was not successful in making the team. And so I reapplied in 1999 and made finalists again. And then I was fortunate enough to get selected at that time.
Had you seen the Blue Angels perform like when you were younger, or did you find out about
Yeah,
it once you were in the Navy?
I saw them practice during their winter training. We used to ride motorcycles as a family out in the desert in California, so I can remember seeing them. And then clearly, I went to a number of air shows when I was in San Diego, out at Miramar, and especially after the Top Gun had come out. Then I went to a bunch of air shows in the Southern California area.
Yeah. So then, as you mentioned, you did get accepted for the team for the 2000 season. What was your most memorable experience while you were on the team?
Well, I was just going to tie it into that last answer, which was seeing the team when I was in my youth, I'll say high school or younger. And now many of the members that were on the teams that I used to watch, I consider good friends, and we worked together on the Blue Angels Foundation. So my most memorable moments, let me ask you this. What do you think my most memorable moments were?
I would have to say probably meeting some of the former pilots would be a memorable.
Yeah, yeah, interestingly, most people think that there's some aspect of the flying, and the flying is very intense. But my most memorable moments were actually the lives that you could affect as a team member. And so every Friday, we would meet with Make a Wish kids from around the country, wherever we were performing an air show. And when you realize that a child, that their Make a Wish is to spend one day with you, that's a pretty powerful position to be in, and kind of puts everything in perspective.
So yeah, obviously the for anybody who doesn't know, the Blue Angels are probably one of the best, or probably the best, flying teams in the world. And when you're there on the team, you are probably one of the best pilots in the world. How do you remain so humble when you're in that position?
Well, I think you realize that you're simply just fortunate enough to be selected to the team. Since 1946, there's been less than 300 pilots that have had the opportunity to fly for the team. And when you first get selected, you think, oh man, this is amazing. I must be that good. And it's a little bit about self, but you're quickly reminded the moment that you check into the squadron and become a team member that you just happen to be one of the fortunate ones. And in fact, you're representing 380,000 Marines and 500,000 sailors worldwide, and you appreciate the humility of that opportunity.
Yeah. So then 2002 was your final year as Malaysia number 5 on the team. And
Yep.
what was it like to leave the team? Were you excited? Were you disappointed to leave? Because I mean, you've been going like straight for 3 years. What was it like?
Yeah, I had enjoyed the team immensely, and the rigor of the schedule didn't really bother me. I kind of embraced it and knew that I was fortunate to spend 3 years on the team. What was interesting, Nathan, is as I landed on my last flight, I actually broke down crying, and it wasn't because it was over. It was because I had survived. And what I mean by that is we mitigate the risk of flying. But when I joined the team in September of 99, we lost two teammates in a fatal crash in Valdosta, Georgia in October of 99. And I didn't realize that I had been carrying um, uh, that entire event with me during the 3 years. So I wept. Of course, had they asked to go back, I certainly would. Even at my age now, if they said, "Hey, we need you," sure, you got to go. It's an incredible experience.
So after that, you went on to command. You went on to some more assignments, and you were even the commander of a squadron. What was? I know the military emphasizes leadership a lot. What was that leadership for you in specific?
Well, so I left the team and went to do my department head tour, which was a middle management tour, and specifically we were involved in Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003 and 2005. And I was able to take all of the leadership lessons that I had learned with the Blue Angels and apply them to that squadron as a leader, and then was subsequently selected for command of an F-18 squadron. And that's where I could really apply the principles and I'll say the discipline, not in the discipline of personnel, but just the rigor and discipline of maintaining 12 F-18s, caring for all of the sailors, making sure they're feeling valued and respected, that they have an input, and that it's about the entire organization and everybody on it that makes the organization succeed. And so I viewed my role as a commanding officer as that of customer service to the other 250 people in the command, and make sure that they were taken care of, that they were happy at work, that they were valued, that their families were happy and content, both physically and mentally. And so when I had command of the F-18 squadron, we went to Afghanistan twice. We were deployed 13 of 17 months. And that was why it was so important to make sure the sailors were well taken care of, that their families were well taken care of, so that we could execute our mission overseas.
So yeah, one of the cooler parts, at least for me personally, that I think about your career that I have heard about is that you were the commander of the Navy's first F-35 Squadron.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? I mean, you were an F-18 pilot. How did you get selected to be the commander?
So I was fortunate to have a successful command tour, and I was asked to go to the Pentagon and lead the Navy's F-35 effort in the Pentagon, which I did for about 11 months. And then they stood up the Navy's first F-35 fighter squadron, and the Navy had never stood up a stealth fighter squadron before. But because of my success in command and ultimately the F-35 experience and contacts that I had gained in the Pentagon, I was selected to stand up that F-35 unit down in Fort Walton Beach. And it was a great opportunity because I got to kind of hand pick the best of the best to help me do that.
Yeah. Actually, did you ever get to fly the F-35?
I did not get to fly the F-35. And the only reason that I wish I would have been able to fly the F-35 is so that when somebody asked me if I got to fly it, I could say yes. But the manufacturer was delayed in the delivery of the F-35, and I was never had the opportunity to fly it. I did a lot of simulator testing, a lot of the helmet testing to get it up and ready.
Yeah. So then a little while after that, I mean, I know there were many years between that, but I know shortly after your command, you left the Navy. What was that? What was the reasoning behind that decision? And were you excited, just like similar to the Blue Angels, were you excited to leave it or were you apprehensive to leave it?
Well, honestly, our family was pretty tired. We had moved 14 times in 21 years. My kids had never attended more than 2 years at the same school, and we had moved all over the country to include Japan, from California to DC. And so I had done everything that I wanted to do in the Navy, and it was taking a toll on the family. And so we decided collectively together that we would make the leap and retire from the Navy. And so that's what we did. And we wanted to move back to Colorado Springs, which is where I live now, and it's where I've lived since we retired. And for us, it ended up being a really great decision.
Yeah. So then after that, I heard you started flying for United Airlines. Was that planned when you left the Navy? Was that what you were planning on?
No, no, it wasn't actually. I had the opportunity in October of actually the spring of 2014. I was interviewing to be the president of an airline manufacturing company down in Florida, uh, and or fly for United Airlines. And my family, my boys were in high school, and we decided that the family was going to stay in Colorado, and if I was going to go to Florida, then I was going to what we call a geographical bachelor or a geo bachelor. And I decided I didn't want to do that. I had spent too much time away, and so I sought a lot of counsel from professionals that I respect, and uh, took the United job. And as it turns out, that has just been a remarkable series of opportunities that I have enjoyed.
Yeah. So how does flying a commercial airliner compare to an F-18?
Yeah, it certainly moves a little bit slower. It doesn't have the same roll rate, doesn't pull as many G's, but you land 737 in a crosswind during a blizzard in Cleveland, where you're coming down with a 30-degree longitudinal offset, and you've got 180 people that are expecting you to land that airplane to the best of your ability. I would argue that is equal to the pressure that you feel landing on a ship.
So, you mentioned that the commercial airliners fly a little slower. You did get to go back a little bit to the faster jets when you joined the Patriots. Was that Patriots team something you knew about before you got asked to join them?
No, what was interesting is I was asked to run United Airlines 777 demonstration team because of my background with the Blue Angels. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. I would love to do that. And in 2017, at the San Francisco Fleet Week Air Show, I was there as the flight operations lead for the United's demonstration team. And I saw the Patriots for the first time. I didn't even know they existed. And as it turns out, a former Blue Angel that I had served with was on the Patriot Jet team as the number 6 pilot. We bumped into each other, and he said, "Hey, intake, we're looking for a number 5 pilot. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. That sounds like that could be interesting." And about 2 weeks later, I was in L39 doing loops with the owner of the team in formation. And at that point, I hadn't been in a fighter in 5 years, but it came back pretty quickly, and they offered me the opportunity to fly with them. It's a volunteer organization, so I just do it for the love of the game and the adrenaline rush and the camaraderie of the team.
Yeah. So how do the Patriots compare to the Blue Angels? I mean, I know they do a lot of the similar maneuvers, but how do they
Well,
compare?
I think, honestly, I think that I agree with you that the Blue Angels really are the best in the world. It's the way that they fly and the way that they train. The Thunderbirds are very good. The Snowbirds are very good. The Red Arrows. But there is something very special about having the opportunity to fly with the Blue Angels. And so to have the opportunity to fly a 6 ship demonstration with the Patriot Jet team, we don't fly as close as the Blue Angels, but it is absolutely exhilarating. I love it. The team is remarkable, highly trained, highly capable pilots. And so it is a passion of mine to fly for that team.
I've gotten to see the Blue Angels, but I one day I'd love to see the Patriots. hopefully someday. But then you were able to get involved with Top Gun Maverick. So what was it like to get that call to be involved in the recreation of something that inspired you so much to go down this path?
So the Patriot Jet Team, the owner of the team, along with Kevin LaRosa, who owned Helinet, they put together a company called Cinejet, where they mounted uh, a sure shot camera on the front of an L-39 to try and win the contract to film Top Gun Maverick, and they won it. And based on my combat experience, the owner, Randy Howell, asked me if I would come train the actors and actresses. So in December of 2018, I went down to Camarillo, California. We met the actors and actresses and went and flew with them to take them out in a high performance jet so that when they got into the F-18, they would know what that felt like, knew what it felt like to pull G's. And that was just an incredible experience. And I thought that was probably more than I could hope for. And then in June of 2019, they needed to film the final fight scene for the movie. And so Randy called and said, "Hey, we got to film the final fight scene. Will you come do that with me?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely." And so we took 2 weeks and went out and filmed the canyon scenes and the overwater scenes. It was remarkable.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, what do you think? I know the original Top Gun was a huge inspiration to people like you, and I know that the newer one is a really great movie that I'm sure inspired a ton of more people to pursue a career in naval aviation. But what do you think it is that Top Gun does that is so inspirational? Because I know there are other movies like Devotion that I'm sure are really inspirational, but what do you think it is that's about Top Gun?
The all of the flying is real, and that is what Tom demanded. So the flying needed to be real. It needed to be low. It needed to be fast, and it needed to look incredible. So they used cameras that filmed 8,000 frames per second so that they could get that really high def uh, footage. And then they allow the viewer who's watching the movie to be in that airplane and feel the adrenaline and feel the G's and the sounds. And I think that's what makes it so incredible and authentic.
So while you were working there, did with in the Top Gun team, did you ever get to meet Tom Cruise or fly with him?
No, I never met Tom filming Top Gun, but I had the opportunity to meet and work with him closely during the filming of Mission Impossible 8 after we had filmed Top Gun Maverick.
Okay. And I have to ask, which filming was, sorry, not which filming, but which flying was harder, the Top Gun Maverick filming or the Blue Angels?
Oh gosh, the Blue Angel is really intense, highly trained. I would not have been able to fly the Top Gun Maverick scenes had I not flown for the Blue Angels. So, because it's a very specific skill set to do that kind of maneuvering low altitude to the ground. And so, um, I think the Top Gun Maverick was a bit more challenging because of the airplanes we were in, because of the confines of the canyon. Anytime you film a movie scene, you want it really low, you want really dynamic maneuvering in order for it to look incredible on film. So it was very intense flying for sure.
Yeah. All right. And then after you finished filming the Top Gun movie and it was released, you wrote a book, which Full Throttle, which I actually have right here, which I've seen.
It sounds like to tell you the truth, clearly you have read it because
I have read it twice actually. It was a really great book.
fantastic.
Um,
That's
so
awesome. Thank you.
yeah. So where did the inspiration come to write that book?
Yeah, that's in short, my father fancied himself a writer. And whenever I came back from deployment or detachment, combat, I would tell him stories and he kept saying, "You have to write a book. You have to write a book." And I said, "I don't want to write a book. I don't need to tell you the truth. I don't even like writing that much." And then during the pandemic in 2020, he was diagnosed with dementia. And so I did it a bit as an ode to my father to put those stories on paper and write the book and tell the kind of the background and the way that things happened, and the way that I have been able to have the experiences that I have, which you have read. And so it was that and a culmination of being asked to give a presentation at the Patriot Jet Team Gala about why I've been able to do the things that I have. And I said, well, I've never thought about that. And so I had to sit down and figure out why I've had these opportunities and some other people may not. And that really came down to saying yes, just asking for help, and being willing to learn from your errors. And so that all kind of culminated in 2022. And that was kind of the inspiration of the book.
Yeah, so I know we're starting to run short on time here, but as we wrap up, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Patriot Jet Team Foundation because I don't really know much about it. I wanted to learn more about that. I've heard
Sure.
from what I've heard, it is about where you guys teach, or not teach, but like you teach younger kids about aviation. What is it open to, like, people from like nationwide, people in the area? Because I mean, for me, it sounds like something I would be interested in. So what's that all about?
Where do you live?
I live up here in Seattle, so
Oh,
I'm
you do?
out of
Okay.
California, so I don't know if that's
Yeah. So it's a STEM-based program. So science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it's designed to provide science-based training through aviation for people that are, for young men and women that are interested, to get them involved in uh, the craft of flying airplanes while simultaneously teaching science. And they learn about space. And so people are welcome to come out. It doesn't cost anything, but the foundation provides scholarships for young men and women to learn how to fly and get deeper into flying. So it's really an incredible thing that has proven to be very successful. They do, those rocket propelled rockets. They do test firings with those, and they put cameras on them and see how high they can launch them in space. And they do a lot of really great things.
that sounds fun.
So
Yeah, all
yeah,
right.
it's pretty.
Yeah. All right, so just before we end, one last question. I know I did hear that your kids are both fighter pilots now in the Navy. Is that true?
That's correct. So Wyatt is flying. He's my oldest. He's flying F-18s out of Lemoore, California. And our youngest son, Nick, he's not a naval aviator yet, but he is in the jet pipeline, and he is flying the T-45 out of Kingsville, Texas. He should get his Navy wings in October, sometime this fall. And then he will either fly the F-18 or the F-35. So when people talk about what I'm most proud of, it's actually those two boys and what they have been able to accomplish.
I mean, I don't have any, neither of my parents are in the military, but I can imagine the life of having a parent in the military is, moving a lot, can be kind of stressful. What do you think you did that really inspired them, other than, like, to pursue that career? Because I can imagine seeing that it might be stressful for them.
Well, it's interesting. I think for both of them, it was a combination of my wife and I. So I was deployed a lot. So I would imagine, I've never asked them that. I probably should, on what characteristics they took from both Lisa and I to pursue aviation. But I would imagine it was just the thrill of it, and seeing the airplanes and being around the airplanes and being around the people and appreciating the quality of the people and the lifestyle and the patriotism of it. My wife was really the one that made sure they got to swim practice and did their homework and got good grades and got involved in student government and social impact projects. And so the reason that they got into the Naval Academy, in all honesty, is because of my wife, Lisa. It didn't really have much to do with me at all. She's the one that took them everywhere and held them to high standards at home while I was deployed.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to add? Tell me about, or did we cover it all?
No, I think you did a great job of it. I think you're the only person I know, Nathan, that has actually read the book twice besides myself. So that is super inspiring.
But before we ended the interview, Intake had one more fun story he wanted to share.
And so I was flying Blue Angel number 5. This was 2002 at Seattle Seafair. And the sneak pass from number 5 comes from left to right, what we would call crowd left to crowd right. And at that time in the season, because it's usually in August, it's really low to the water because it was a water show. And I don't know if you're familiar with the I-90 bridge, but it's a floating bridge that goes across Lake Washington. And so I had gotten low over the water. I was probably 20 or 30 feet off the water, and I was looking long because when you're flying that fast and that low at 0.99 Mach, you want to look long because if you look into the water, then chances are you can fly into the water. So you look long to the horizon. I was looking out at the bridge and I was going to cross a perpendicular, and there were two light posts on the bridge, and I was going to go between the light posts in the distance. And so I was looking at those two poles and I'm just screaming over Lake Washington. And what I didn't see was the sailboat mast that I was below, because if you put your finger in front of you, but you look long, you can't really see your finger. Well, the same thing had happened. And so the sailboat mast was out here, but I was looking long. And then all of a sudden, whoosh, I caught the speed and the movement of the sailboat mast as it went by. And I thought, ooh, that was pretty too close to call right there.
People on the sailboat must have had a pretty fun time.
I'm sure it looked pretty dynamic.